sad and the nights are long and the whole wide world is going wrong. It's all because I'm far away from home. When I bow my head and I close my eyes, it is then I stop and realize.
I always used to be able to say above the post office, but of course it is torn down, and where the restrooms and the just on the corner, on the just my parents. That's where when I was born, I lived there, and I lived across the street, right on that corner also. Of course, early, my mother was at home. They were very, very young. My father worked at the co-op gas station, which was just a block east of, right on the corner. So that's why I was looking at some old pictures, and all of my pictures show where the old lumber yard was, and different places right here, until when I started school, then we moved into a house. Well, it's the back entrance to the school, the old school, where the football field was. There's a little round rock, some sort of an old well type thing there, right on the creek. The house is still there. I did everything. I was a tomboy. I was brought up as an only child, so I didn't have anyone at home to play with, so we all played together. And of course, I also spent lots of times reading, because I loved to read. But I rode my bike, I roller skated. It was great fun to roller skate all around the square here growing up. And we also would turn cartwheels all around the square. It was just, I played football with the boys. I thought I climbed trees. I recently saw a picture of myself up in a tree in front of my house, and people said, "How did you get up there? Weren't you afraid of falling?" Well, no, I just did it. We didn't have kindergarten in Glen Elder until I was up in the elementary grades, and we had a principal whose wife had been teaching kindergarten. Fred Borsdorf was his name, and so we didn't have kindergarten. We just had first grade. Well, then when I was, it was time when I was like 6 years old, and I lived a block from school, from elementary school, through the 8th grade. And then when I was in high school, I went just a little bit to the left, and I had just about a block to go to high school. So of course I walked everywhere.
Now there were kids from out of town too that lived out on the farm.
Yes, right.
And what was your interaction with the children from rural areas?
It was great fun, because it was nice to be with some others to play with. And my husband used to say that I was a city girl, because he grew up south of Glen Elder, and it wasn't nearly as much fun riding a bike out in his lane and on the dirt roads as it was in town, even though it probably wasn't all paved.
So in school, what did you enjoy doing? What classes did you enjoy?
I loved it.
Did you have any classes you enjoyed?
I loved it all. Of course, I loved English, because I liked to read. I liked anything to do with history. Science, I guess, yes, it was fine, except our biology book in high school had pictures of snakes. And I would cover up the pictures of the snakes. I was that afraid of snakes.
Okay. Were there any other activities at school that you enjoyed, or?
Well, yes, because, we played, and after we were up in the older grades, we, with a couple of other towns, we played, well, we would have like one track meet a year, and we played, by the time I was in junior high ages, we played basketball and softball and played other teams from the area.
Okay.
And the class ahead of me was a very small class. And as I said, I was such a tomboy, so I was used to playing with the boys and rough and tumble, and I got to play earlier than maybe some of them in my class because it just so happened that I liked it. And I wasn't afraid, to be rough. I was little, though. I was always little.
Oh, a little tougher than it.
Yeah.
So you enjoyed English.
Yes.
But science with the snakes or biology with snakes.
Right.
Um,
Math, probably the subject I liked the least was math.
Okay. Were you involved in we've talked about football, basketball, but were you involved in any after-school activities?
Girl Scouts.
Okay.
Girl Scouts. I loved Girl Scouts. We did a lot of things. Started as a brownie. It's fun to tell Girl Scouts when they come to the door selling Girl Scout cookies, and as an old lady, I can tell them, I sold Girl Scout cookies. Really, they couldn't believe.
So, do you remember your troop leader?
Yes. One of them was Lola Range.
And how long did she lead your troop?
Several years.
Okay.
I can't imagine there being anything any different. I knew everybody knew everybody. I remember there was one of the gentlemen in town was getting older. He probably wasn't as old as I would think at the time he was, but you knew that you couldn't count on him always stopping at the intersections, and he was probably shouldn't have been driving later, but you knew that. We were all the same. One thing I say is I grew up poor, but I didn't realize it because everybody else was the same. Now there were a couple from the class that had family that lived a long ways away, so they would go there. And as we got a little older, I can remember a classmate going to California to see some family. But we didn't. So most people didn't go on vacations like we do now, but people stayed here. They didn't move other places. And that's one thing that was nice. As I had children of my own, it was fine here because both sides of the family was here yet. And of course now people move, and so you don't have that closeness, that connection that we had growing up.
So with it being such a small town and with everybody knowing everybody, I would imagine level of mischief could be
Probably, yes.
lower.
I think there was a little. I do remember the only time I got a spanking, a paddling from my dad, it was right here on the north side of the square, and I don't know why. I was an only child, so I was probably rather spoiled. My dad went to get in, and I was tired of waiting, and I had locked the door and get that door unlocked. And when I did, I got one swat. Only time I ever remember my dad giving me a spanking. Now, I got talked to a few times. Mom did a few times. But I don't remember people doing some of the bad things that you hear about.
Mm-hmm.
And as I got older, I was never to any of the parties that I hear stories about.
But with a small town, everybody's watching out.
Yes,
for everybody.
everybody's, yes. You couldn't really get away with a whole lot because everybody knew who you were.
Mm-hmm.
And later, I know when I had an exchange student who lived with us, she said, everybody speaks to me, everybody knows me, and they know everything about me. Then when she moved back and went to Brisbane, Australia, nobody knew her. And she decided maybe living around here was pretty nice after all, because people know and cared. I think actually, by the time I was in junior high, I was doing a few things. I remember cleaning house for someone. I didn't do a whole lot, but I did do a little bit of cleaning, and I earned a few dollars. I worked at the Terry Rexall drugstore as a soda jerk, and of course, that's where the women went to buy their lipstick, their perfumes, their school supplies were sold there. And then I did, that just a little bit. But then in high school, I waited tables, I guess is the work I did.
Oh, where at?
It was the steakhouse. It was on the east side of the square, about where the community room is, part of the library along there.
Okay.
Was a little to the north.
And how did you like that job?
I liked it. It was fun. I liked to hear the people, some of their talking, but like I said, I sure learned that the men could gossip just as good as the women, and at least when the women left, they probably even took a napkin and wiped up if any coffee was spilled or anything. And of course, they certainly wouldn't have tracked dirt or mud in like the men did, because then we always had to mop the floor before the lunch people came. I usually worked during the morning and at noon. I didn't work evenings that much, waiting tables.
Was it a popular restaurant?
Oh, yes, and good food.
Okay. How many restaurants were there in town at the time?
Well, at that time, there was just the one. Before, there had been the one over, like where Cunningham's is. Mm-hmm. And I remember that was Porter's. And I remember we used to go in there, and they had the jukebox. That's when I was younger. And we didn't go out to eat. Later in life, then, my mother cooked at the restaurant. And so I had that inroad with going there to eat sometimes, but as a family, we never went out to eat. We didn't go anyplace. It was Mom and I would go to Beloit 2 duck walls, and they had a counter, food, and I can remember it was so exciting to get a real little bitty bag with warm cashews. I guess maybe that's why I like nuts still to eat. That is a memory. But to actually go out to eat, just didn't do it. Later, when I was dating, there was the Corral, which is the Banner in Beloit now, is where it was. They used to come out, and now they weren't on roller skates, but they came out to the car, and you ordered, and they put the tray on. And because I was always, after I started dating my husband, which I dated him all throughout my years in high school, starting the end of my freshman year, he always got a vanilla shake or malt, and I thought, more flavor. So we did, by the time I was in high school, dating, we did eat a few times, some.
Now, you mentioned Porter's, where
Mhm.
Cunningham's is now.
Mm-hmm.
They had a jukebox.
Yes.
Was there dancing and?
Well, all the time in junior high and high school, we had Teen Town, and it was on the west side, like where the senior center is, beside where the drugstore. And yes, we danced and we danced and we danced.
What music did you dance to and listen to?
Well, rock and roll.
I asked because there's different
From
tastes,
right. There's still, I still always liked big band music, and I think we probably, some of the more upbeat, that music we did too, but always liked to listen to music.
What were the radio stations you listened to back then? Were there many, or were there just a few?
Well, there was, I guess maybe in Salina. I know the farmers, I think, listened to a place up in Nebraska, KOMA, in Oklahoma City. And I every so often you'll hear people talk about that still, that people will remember that was the with it music.
Okay, how about television?
I remember when we got television. The first television that I saw was right next to the building where we are. Well, I guess there was Keener's Variety Store first, and then there was the hardware store, Dean Granger's, and then Dean Hardware Store. And they had a TV in the window. And then on the west side of the block, Boehner's, I think it was Boehner's Electric is what it was called. They did plumbing and electricity and all. And they had TVs just there. And I don't remember, but we used to go to my granddad's up on the hill, Granddad Jones, and watch TV. And just again, someone else in the family, an older person, recently said Guy Jones had the first TV, bought one of the first TVs in town. And he would have bought it right here from, I'm sure.
Did television, did that impinge upon your movie viewing time?
Well, no, not really, because we didn't have that many choices on TV. We had NBC, which was in Great Bend. We could pick that up with the antennas, and then later, after they got the ABC station in Nebraska, just across, we had that. But we didn't get the CBS out of Wichita the best until later. I remember, again, I talked about being active in Girl Scouts. We went to Great Bend, our scout troop did, and I remember we got to be on TV there, and that was a fun experience because everyone back here, except our mothers who had driven us in the cars to take us there, everyone else knew to watch. And of course you couldn't have recorded it, you had to see it live. But TV was great. I can remember when my next door neighbors, they got a TV before we did. They probably had a little bit more money than some of the people in town. And we would, especially the first few nights when they got it, Mom and I would walk across the yard and watch TV until it went off at midnight. Okay, yes, we had movies in Glen Elder. I didn't get to experience them. The first theater, I guess it would be, which was just on west of the square. But I remember my parents talking about seeing movies there. And in the summer, we had movies every Saturday night over on the southwest corner across from the square. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't just old movies. They got fairly recent movies. It wasn't. I loved movies. My mother liked movies, so we did go to the movies in Beloit sometimes because there were 2 theaters. And then, of course, when I was in high school, there was the drive-in, and we would go to the drive-in.
And where was the drive-in?
It was the western, along the highway, just outside of Beloit. Okay. Now we have a swimming pool here in Glen Elder. Growing up, you had to go to Beloit to the swimming pool. There were 3 or 4, sometimes maybe even 5 of we girls who would get on the train here, ride to Beloit, and go swimming. The depot was right close by the pool. We would swim all afternoon, and one of the girls' father, actually he was a car salesman in Beloit, and he would bring us home.
So, do you remember how much it cost to take the train?
Little of nothing. I really don't remember. And I'm wondering, since my family had the connections with the railroad, if I even had to pay. Surely I did. But
well, how old were you when you were doing this?
Well, then we were 12 to 13.
Would you go anywhere else besides Beloit on the railroad?
I never ever did, no. That's why it was fun later to ride Amtrak one time to Chicago. So I didn't, I didn't go growing up where you could go into a dining car or do anything like that. So that was a fun experience to have.
Where else would you go outside of town?
We went, the churches, the youth groups, we would work together, and 1 month, one of the churches would have a skating party, and we were all invited, the others from the other churches, and we used to go to Downs to roller skate. Only time I ever grew up much going to Downs was to go there to roller skate. And then later in high school, we still did it. We still went roller skating, but we started going to Glasgow to the roller skating rink. And I grew up roller skating. My husband used to talk about it. He remembers when they got their electricity growing up, and when they put the convenience room in the house rather than going outside. And I thought, oh my goodness. Now there was a short time, a few years, that I did live just kind of at the edge of town out in the country. And I doubt that we had indoor plumbing that much there, but I don't remember that. I do remember, though, my dad rigging up in the summer a shower up in a tank, and he, you know, he would be hot and dirty and that. But I don't have any memories of that, living that way. But from my husband and from others, I remember staying overnight with a friend south of town, and I thought, oh my goodness. And I remember we had to be careful even when we brushed our teeth. We couldn't waste the water from the cistern and all. And I was used to turning on the water, having it.
There was a big difference.
There was. I can remember hearing my husband and his sister talk about the roads where they lived out in the country. They would park the old pickup up in the pasture close to the main road that goes south of Glen Elder, and they would ride the tractor from the house up to the pickup truck, and then that's how they would come to town to school. They never missed school. They always came, no matter how much snow there was. I remember my mother-in-law saying, when space travel started, saying, why in the world are we going to the moon and I have a dirt road? Of course, obviously, we knew there had to be something done. The flood in 1951, I was a child, but I know our basement filled. And so by then, there had been talk before then from what I have learned, but there needed to be the dams. The dam would not be right where it is if it were now, because of the history of what they covered up. They have changed where they put dams because of a pollywog or of a little flower. It needed to be, but it could have been just a little farther and not covered Waconda Springs. Wherever it was put, it was going to take in this area a lot of farmland. And that greatly changed the area because some of the older farmers could retire and they moved to town after the government took their land, but so many left. But there are a few people that are here because they came during the dam construction and they stayed, or maybe they had a child that was in high school and they married someone from here. It made a change because of the farming with taking the land, and I was waiting tables when they were, and here some when they were starting on it. I remember before they did it, some of the archaeologists that came and they studied places where the Native Americans had been, and I guess that kind of got where I like history anyway. That made me very fascinated by that because it certainly changed the area when they put the dam in. And it's changed now because of all of the people who use the lake and come for pleasure. And so there are businesses that the dam and the lake have brought, like the boats, the RVs, and the more need of motels, places to stay. I can't imagine it, the dam and the lake not being here, but I wish it wouldn't have been exactly here myself, but that's because I think there was so much history here that was lost when they covered up the springs and all of the Native American history that was in not just there, but the area. But there's no way anything like that's going to please everyone. And like I said, I know we needed a dam close by here. It was home. I felt comfortable, always. I just never had the desire to see all of the world as while I was young, and then even as an adult. All I cared about was, yes, I wanted to see what it was like in the cities, even the great big cities, but only just to know about it. I didn't have to. I mean, it was, there's a whole world out there. I can remember walking on the streets in New York City with teenagers like myself, and we needed to get to the place where we could go out on the ferry to see the Statue of Liberty. We asked this man, now, will a bus that comes along here, will it get us where we need to be? Because we're going where we had no idea. He'd never been there. He'd never been to the Statue of Liberty. Never thought about it. Thought we were crazy because we wanted to do those things. Sometimes even in cities, I find that you can talk to people and they still have their little, not exactly a cocoon around them, but
when I get off at the station and I see those happy smiles, I will tell the whole creation I would walk 1,000 miles just to be